So another interesting question, something that was submitted by one of our viewers, a very common question. People go on an airline and they order a kosher meal. They get the kosher meal to their seat and they see a kosher designation, so they know that the meal is kosher. Does that designation also go on how the meal was prepared, or should they just assume that the meal was double wrapped when it was warmed up on the plane? Shed some light on that issue.
So that's a very, very important issue. And again, it has many layers and levels to the question. For those of us who travel economy, like me, it's not much of a question. Because if you travel economy, the meal, the kosher meal that is received on the airline is double wrapped. It's warmed up in the microwave or whatever online, on the airplane, double wrapped. You get it, and you get the opportunity to open it up and make a mess with all the wrapping and try to get it open. But that's a practical issue, but for halachic perspective, it's fantastic. Everything is disposable, so you don't have to be concerned about any kalim. You don't have to be concerned about dishes and about silverware. It's fantastic. But then there are people who are lucky enough to travel in business class and first class. So there they give you a much more significant and sophisticated service. So now the issue starts. The meal comes to the plane typically double wrapped. But if they're going to open it and serve it to you unwrapped, then it becomes basar shenasal manayin. You don't know what was, what wasn't this meal before it was served to you. And moreover, the oven in which they put it in was a non-kosher oven, right, and it wasn't wrapped. So no different than if I warm up any kosher food in a non-kosher oven, it compromises the status of the food. So it's important that the food be served to you double wrapped or be warmed up double wrapped. But then, and this is an issue on El Al versus other airlines. On other airlines, when you're traveling business class or first class, they're not serving you on disposable. Not the dishes are not disposable, nor the silverware is disposable. And what they're doing is that the airline is giving the kosher caterer new dishes.
Really?
Yeah. It's not that much, because how many glatt kosher travelers do you have on airlines besides El Al? Mm-hmm. So, and they anyway constantly need to have new silverware and new dishes to replenish breakage and lost. El Al has a much different situation because they have everything kosher. And the OU out of New York and out of Los Angeles certifies the commissary that prepares those meals. We don't certify the dishes because those dishes travel around the world with El Al. And El Al that's serving food from different commissaries around the world are using the same dishes. Now, the only time we could be comfortable something served on a dish or something used with silverware is if we were certifying all of those kitchens. Right. But we don't certify all of those kitchens. So we're not taking responsibility for the service. So if you want to be confident that when you're traveling on El Al, even if you're traveling business class or first class, you have to order the Mahadran meal or the special kosher meal. Mm-hmm. We're taking responsibility not just for the food, but for the service as well.
So what happens with the Mahadran meal on El Al?
So the Mahadran meal on El Al...
We're talking about in business class or first class.
So either they're going to be using disposable on the Mahadran meal, or if they're not using disposable...
And they double wrap it?
And everything's double wrapped. Okay. And if they're not using disposable, those dishes don't go back into the Mahadran service, they stay in the non-Mahadran service.
But they're brand new dishes that were never used.
You can't kasher a dish.
So they actually warm up the food,
right,
and then take it out and put it on brand new dishes,
right,
and serve it to
right,
you.
And that dish will never be used again for Mahadran.
For Mahadran.
Because you can't kasher.
Wow.
Now, what you need to think about are a number of issues. The meals that you're getting on El Al when you're traveling from the United States to Israel is a glatt meal on all services. The meal that you get from Israel to the United States or from Israel to anywhere is not necessarily a glatt meal.
Isn't that ironic? I mean,
It is, and many times when I travel and I see people who would want to only eat a glatt meal, and they're eating the regular El Al meal, and they're assuming, well, it's produced in Israel, it must be glatt. It's not. The meat is not necessarily glatt. The fruits and vegetables are not necessarily on the standard that everybody would want to use regarding mitzvahs atluyos ba'aretz. And another very, very important issue, again, in El Al, particularly in business class or first class. I'll tell you an interesting story with it. I was in Eretz Yisrael once, and I was standing at the Kosher, davening Shachris, Kivasikin, and somebody comes to the Kosher who used to be a Talmud of mine, used to come to one of my shiurim, and he's so angry at me. I don't remember what I did that he should be so angry at me. So I approach him, what's the matter? He said, I just arrived from the United States to Eretz Yisrael this morning. And I traveled business class, and they served me wine. And then I discovered that the wine was not mavushal, and was served by a non-Shomer Shabbos stewardess. Now, why that was my fault, I'll never figure out. But if you're in the world of kashrus, everything is your fault. If you didn't have a good dinner last night, it's my fault, right? So it was my fault that the wine that was served was not mavushal. And people, when they travel on a non-Jewish airline, they understand that the wine that's being served is not kosher. They understand there may be issues with stam yenam. But when they're traveling on El Al, they don't think that those issues may be there. And they're real issues. And we have to be very careful.
well, Rabbi Elefant, thank you for clarifying these two important issues, and thank you for all you've done for the world of kashrus.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Kol tov.